Mr. Barrett, go ahead, sir.
I'm not surprised, of course, Chair, that Liberal members of the committee want to try to cover up the corruption and failures and fraud that has run rampant after 9 years of their government. Here we have departmental officials in front of us. We have matters that have been referred to the RCMP, but like so many cases when we, or so many examples that we have with respect to procurement, what Liberal members want is commercials about how well everything is going, and they don't want any accountability. We heard that about the Arrive scam app. It was supposed to cost $80,000. It cost many orders of magnitude more than that, and they tried to thwart, they tried to shut down investigations at absolutely every single turn. We found out, of course, that it cost $54 million, and that the contractors who worked on it, of course, have had their front doors kicked in by the RCMP, and we know now that it has been just the very top layer of the onion that is this Liberal government. After 9 years of Justin Trudeau, all that they can do is try and shut down these basic tools for accountability that we have. And, well, I know it brings them great pain to step away from their back deck and their swimming pool. We have important work to do on behalf of Canadians. I know for a certainty that folks in my community, I know for a certainty that folks in ridings across this country, 338 ridings, they want accountability for this corrupt Liberal government. That's what they want, and they want it in the summer, not just when Liberal MPs have feel like they'll tolerate questions from the public. So we have these officials here today, and I have questions prepared for the officials, and they're not allowed to answer our questions during this motion that's been put forward. That's a tactic to shut down accountability. We've seen it for it's increased. It's increased as we've uncovered more corruption and more examples of the cover-ups that the Liberals have tried to perpetrate. But my questions, it's so interesting that they find them political. How many cases of fraud have been referred to the RCMP? There's nothing political about that. That question is Canadians have a right to know, and they have an interest in knowing the volume of fraud that is being perpetrated on the government. Canadians are lined up at food banks in record numbers. They're struggling to get by, teetering on the brink of insolvency in record numbers. And what they see is contractors like the grifters at GC Strategies, who were banking tens of millions of dollars and doing no IT work on IT contracts. And we've learned that it's just the tip of the iceberg. Ghost contracting, double billing, but these guys they were adding no value. We know now that there are contractors who were employees of the federal government who were being, this Liberal federal government, who were being used as subcontractors because we were told the government didn't have the capability in-house to do it. Well, by virtue of the person working at the government, we know that they have the capability in-house to do it. Have the RCMP contacted the Trudeau Liberal government regarding criminal investigations into consultants that were not referred by the government to the RCMP? I fail to see how that's a political question. But they don't, the Liberals don't want that accountability. They don't want that spotlight on the corruption that they're presiding over, on insiders lining their pockets while Canadians struggle. How many billions of taxpayer dollars does the Liberal government spend on high-priced consultants every year? That would be the question that I addressed to Mr. Mills, who's in front of the committee today. He's not allowed to answer because the Liberals are shutting down the questioning of these witnesses, it's more than $20 billion. $20 billion. And I could ask for a precision from Ms. Poulin, who talked about the percentage of fraud on total contracting, and to extrapolate what the forecast would be for opportunity for fraud or suspected fraud within the federal government. But I can't ask because the Liberals are blocking us from being able to ask questions. They're using procedural shenanigans to stop us from getting accountability for Canadians. So the example of Miss Clara Visser, who has been charged, it's one of these consultants who's been charged for fraudulent building. We know that there's another 3 who've been referred to the RCMP. Canadians want to know how many more of these fraudsters and scammers are stealing Canadian tax dollars. So Canadians see half their paychecks vaporized by government, and they don't know how much of the money is going to cases where fraud and corruption, being the fraudsters, being the beneficiaries of the taxes that have been collected from Canadians. How many government employees, Mr. Mills, are employed as consultants? Well, he can't answer me, Chair, because of the procedural shenanigans by the Liberals. We want to know how many government employees are employed as consultants, where we have the taxpayer paying twice to get the service one time. I fail to see what's political about that, except for a corrupt, tired government after 9 years that is terrified of the accountability of Conservatives, holding up a spotlight on the corruption they've presided over. And if the claim by the Liberals was that, we're going to let the process unfold. We know that they voted against having the Auditor General investigate their Arrive scam. We know that. We know they try and block these. They're on the record. The Prime Minister, the Cabinet, the Liberal members of this committee, they voted against having the Auditor General investigate. So what interest would they have in Canadians not knowing about fraud and corruption? Well, it's because it's their buddies. These are Liberal insiders and grifters who are dining out, lining their pockets, while Canadians are lined up at food banks. That's why they're blocking it. On double dipping, my question to our witnesses is that last year, in an industry that's growing under this government, 79 cases last year, 84 cases this year of double dipping. That's people getting paid by the government and getting paid by the government to be contractors. How many of them are in a conflict of interest? And I hope that the witnesses that we have today will take the opportunity to make good note of my questions, because the questions, I maintain curiosity for myself and on behalf of Canadians looking for answers. And though you won't be formally asked by the committee to provide those answers, you of course could furnish those in writing through the clerk to the committee, because Canadians want to know. 50% of consultants being in conflicts. Do we know if any of the government employees who are double dipping are also suspected of any of the fraud or corruption beyond their conflicts of interest? So we have some who are in a conflict, that's been established. Have we established if they're is also suspected fraud? Have they been cleared of allegations of fraud and corruption in those cases where the conflicts of interest have been identified? That's an important precision for Canadians. We have an appearance of a conflict, okay. We have an actual conflict, okay. Well, is it criminal in nature, or is there alleged or suspected criminality? Well, Canadians want to know. It's not partisan. That's not partisan. That's what we're supposed to do here at the Standing Committee on Government Operations. That's the purpose of our role as parliamentarians. 12 months of the year, including in July. We know that of the list of consulting companies that PSPC has created, many of them don't execute the function. They don't perform the work under the contract that they've received, like GC Strategies. And some of them just have 2 employees. So 5 of those examples. Solutions Moray Inc. They have 2 employees, $78 million in contracts. Mesa Computing Incorporated, 1 associated member, $34 million in contracts. Mobile Resources Group, 1 associated member, $28 million in contracts. Access Corporate Technologies Incorporated, 2 associated members, $9 million in contracts. Hackett Consulting Incorporated, 1 associate member, $8 million in contracts. But the Liberals say talking about this is political. Why? Are they connected to the Liberal Party? Are they connected to Liberal ministers? Are they connected to Liberal members of Parliament? Is that why it's political? Because my questions to officials aren't about Justin Trudeau unless he's connected to those companies, which is, I guess, the contention of the Liberals who are blocking us from asking these questions of the officials who are seated at the table in front of us. What value did Canadians get from Solutions Moray Incorporated for $78 million? That's my question. What value did Canadians get from Mesa Computing Incorporated for $34 million? What value did Canadians get from Mobile Resources Group for $28 million? And what value did Canadians get from Access Corporate Technologies Incorporated for $9 million? What value did Canadians get from Hackett Consulting Incorporated for $8 million? So without officials being able to answer, having the officials muzzled by the Liberal MPs, we're just left to speculate on the value or the reasons for these contracts having been awarded. Is it because the minister directed that the PSPC minister directed that these companies be awarded these contracts? Are there connections between the Liberal Party and these companies? Is that why the Liberals are muzzling the officials who are before the committee today? We don't know, because the Liberals are blocking us from asking the questions. We could suppose that there are individuals who are perpetrating fraud on the government who's not delivering, not executing on their fiduciary responsibility to protect Canadians' tax dollars, who are not doing their job. And so we have grifters and fraudsters and scammers who are taking advantage. That, if the charge of the Liberal members is that that's too political, well, Is it because you feel responsible for it? Because the Liberal government is responsible for its failures. It is responsible for the allowing the grifting and the fraud to run rampant. So I'd like to know from our witnesses today, are high-priced consulting middlemen still being used throughout the government? Has the minister done their job to stop the racket from continuing? Now, if the answer was yes, the Liberals would, of course, want this questioning to go ahead. They'd want the officials to say, of course, the minister's taken strong action. But we're now left to see that they're muzzling the officials, departmental officials, because is it not true that at this very minute there are middlemen like GC Strategies just soaking Canadian taxpayers? More examples of people like Clara Visser who are perpetrating fraud on the government, picking Canadians' pockets. But maybe the minister doesn't know. So I would, of course, ask if the minister has been briefed on the value Canadians are getting for the hundreds of millions spent on the middlemen who do no actual work. Was the minister briefed? What was the date? Did the minister request it, or was it offered by the DM or the ADM? And then if the minister didn't request it, or if the minister wasn't briefed, well, I would propose that perhaps we hear from the minister as to why they didn't take an interest. It's very interesting that instead of basic accountability, the Liberals immediately see it as a political crisis. I think it's very telling. I think it's very telling that they see this as a political crisis. Is it because they can't handle any more crises? We know that they're refusing. The Prime Minister is refusing to even meet with caucus, his Liberal caucus. But I don't expect it's because they're concerned about these issues, or they'd have the opportunity today to ask officials questions and show their constituents that they're concerned about the cost of living crisis after 9 years of Justin Trudeau and his inflationary spending. Because they're collecting more in taxes. They've raised taxes on the middle class that they've been very effective at shrinking. The middle class, not the taxes. The taxes grow, the middle class shrinks. But are Canadians getting more services for it? What's been the increased benefit to Canadians for the $20 billion? We know what the increased benefit's been for the likes of Christian Firth and GC Strategies. We know what it's like for the scammers and the fraudsters who are stealing from Canadians. We know what the benefit is for them. No one was holding them accountable. Imagine the delight. Imagine the joy on the face of the grifters, of the thieves who have been perpetrating their crimes, carrying out their crimes against Canadians, stealing thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars in individual cases. And then many of those cases to find out that the Government Operations Committee, don't worry, they're going to stop asking the hard questions that have produced action from a government that was completely caught flat-footed, completely unaware, is the best case, that they just didn't understand that they needed to protect Canadian taxpayers. Worst case is that they're complicit and that they're connected and that they're more worried about the consulting class than they are about Canadians who work incredibly hard and see their earnings vaporized with inflation and see their paychecks more than halved in taxes, with taxes. What a gift to the corrupt that the Liberals are giving them by attempting to stop accountability. Just count, you can picture it. You can picture it. They've got their countdown clock to each break so that they can, each break in parliamentary proceedings. Well, the House isn't sitting upstairs, so there's no way committees could meet. Of course committees can meet. My constituents are well represented if I'm in Ottawa for 4 hours. Does it mean I might need to pack a few more meetings into another day? Absolutely. But when I see them, I don't hear from any of them. You know, you guys have too many committee meetings in Ottawa. It seems like it's getting a little too political down there. You asking for answers about all of that money that's hemorrhaging out of Justin Trudeau's Ottawa. You know what? That's not something that I hear from people. I hear that they're struggling. I hear that they want change. They want change by this government, and they want a change from this government. They want a new government. But in the meantime, they expect that after the what would have been a devastating loss for the Liberals in Toronto St. Paul's, losing a safe seat in Toronto, that there would see some kind of change in terms of their posture, their approach, that they take Canadians' concerns seriously. So I don't know if you heard, Chair, there was a cabinet shuffle last week. Real change from a government that promised real change.
Real innovator.
A real innovative change.
Yeah.
And just like shuffling chairs on the Titanic, they moved one guy from over there to over there. When one of their ministers decided to flee the sinking ship, they moved another guy who was already in cabinet into that spot. Real change. I don't think they got the message, Canada. Because here we are today talking about fraud, talking about conflicts of interest, talking about waste, scandal, mismanagement. And instead of asking a single question of officials, what's the very first thing the Liberals do? They want to pass a motion to block all meetings in the summer. That tells you everything you need to know. It tells one everything they need to know about a government that after 9 years can't even calculate the waste. And we have the officials at the table. It's addressing corruption. And they said that, you know, it's political. Oh, this is political, that they want to talk about it. I haven't heard anything mentioned that's not about accountability for the government. I fail to see what those members, what Liberal members could be doing that they can't spare 2 hours. The majority of them are joining virtually. They didn't leave their so they're still in their constituency. They can have a meeting immediately before it with a constituent and a meeting immediately after it with a constituent. But if they're busy, that it doesn't need to be a regular member of the committee. All members of the House are associate members of this committee and can be brought in as substitutes. I'm a sometimes regular, sometimes associate member of this committee. But the work is very important. And I know that for Ms. Block and for Mr. Brock and for myself, though we're participating in the meeting today, there are many other colleagues who are very interested and offered to make themselves available for the meeting, because they're hearing the same things that we're hearing from their constituents and from Canadians when they're visiting other communities. And that's that they're concerned about affordability, and they're concerned that after 9 years, this Liberal government seems completely unconcerned with their plight and is very comfortable. These Liberals are very comfortable with $20 billion going out the door to consultants in a year, having nothing to show for it. And when we dig in, when we just peel off the first layer, we immediately start to find fraud and corruption. And we're seeing that the private sector, there's entities and individuals in the private sector who are carrying out this fraud and corruption, and the government has been investigating and suspending employees now that we've turned up the heat. But they were taking no action on it. And it's just like the $1 billion green slush fund that they didn't want to talk about. Well, you know, there was going to be a consulting report about that, and it was all good, and they were going to handle it. And we pressed on them, on that Liberal government. We demanded accountability. And what did we find? The chair, another appointee, they're now under investigation for conflicts of interest. The Auditor General's report was damning. All of the Liberals voted against it, which is damning. And they ultimately had to shut down Sustainable Development Technologies Canada because it was so corrupt. What, I think 180, more than 180 conflicts of interest were found. They had directors in the room, and the Liberals were fine with it. They had directors who were voting on giving their own companies money. And they said, oh, well, they talked to their lawyers, so they said there was no conflict, so there's no conflict. I know Canadians don't see it that way. But it took incredible pressure. Incredible pressure. And we had to drag them kicking and screaming every step of the way. But we've got part of the way there. We're achieving some accountability. We're getting some answers. We're going to need to get Canadians their money back, because that's an important part of this too. And I think that's one of the main messages that should come out of this, is that the Liberals are prepared to disengage from the accountability mechanisms, and Conservatives are taking a very common sense approach. If you steal from Canadians, you will be caught, and we will get the money back. And you ought to be jailed. Now, that's not something that we can control. We'll refer the matters to the police. The police can refer to the Crown. The Crown can take it to court. But what can we do? we can root out the corruption and get the money back. Now, why is it that the Liberals don't want to get the money back? Who got the money? Who got Canadians money that these Liberals don't want to get their money back? Is it because they know them? It's because they're Liberal insiders? Well, we could ask the officials some questions, but the Liberal procedural shenanigans are blocking that from happening. Public servants working as consultant contractors with the government. We know that it's a growing industry. It's a growth industry for bureaucrats who choose to engage in it. Ticked up to 84 identified cases in 23-24. And we know that half of them were in a real or apparent conflict of interest. Alenia International. It's an international development consultancy providing technical and management expertise. They've received $14 million in government contracts since 2016. Think Digital, a digital consulting firm, has received nearly $400,000 in government contracts. One of their employees was a candidate for the Liberal Party of Canada in the 2019 election. Now we're on to trouble. Is that why the Liberals have their procedural shenanigans today to stop us from asking questions? Make sure that their failed candidates and buddies are getting their $400,000 in government contracts. Canadian Equality Consulting Incorporated specialize in diversity and inclusion consulting. More than $500,000 in government contracts since 2021. H2 Analytics. Intelligence and defense consultants help decision makers turn information into intelligence. $2.4 million. If they work for the government, why is the government paying them a salary, benefits, pension contributions, and then also paying them consulting fees worth millions of dollars? Like, that doesn't make sense. It doesn't make any sense at all. Why are we allowing that to happen? And I know that when we passed a motion about banning the practice of double dipping, that we had, I think it was National Defense said that they were fine. That after a parliamentary committee passed a motion condemning the practice, you had a department say, no, we think it's fine. That's the contempt. That's the contempt that this Trudeau government has for Canadians. That even when elected officials condemn a practice, to have a department say, no, we're good with that. We think it makes good sense to pay government employees in contracting, to pay them with contracts as well, to get them paid twice. It's absurd. So is that what's political that the Liberals don't want to talk about? The absurdity of the policies that they've not just presided over, that they have departments promoting. Saying they're going to keep doing it. They think it makes sense to hire someone because they're the best person for the job, and then to hire them as a consultant because they're the best person for the job. Well, are they... How is it possible that they're both the best consultant and the best employee? And they're getting paid twice. Shouldn't we Shouldn't we be using that person's expertise in-house? Because we hear all the time, well, we need these outside contractors because we don't have the in-house expertise. Well, all those middlemen companies billing what amounts to hundreds of millions of dollars, they're not adding any value. Google and LinkedIn, maybe, or maybe we have departmental officials telling companies like KPMG that if they want to get the contract, that they've got to be a subcontractor to a two-person outfit with a couple of jokers working out of a basement who are just marking everything up 30%. It's not added value. It's not bringing in any expertise. And it's incredibly expensive. And it's certainly not like the government's presiding over, financial management that sees us in some kind of boom times. They've spent more money. They've racked up more debt than all governments before it combined. That's their legacy. They'll often brag about, well, no one spent more on housing and got worse results. That's the part they're leaving out. No one's ever spent so much to achieve so little. And I guess that would have to be the Liberal campaign slogan, and that's why we haven't had an election, to say nothing of the lack of confidence that Canadians have in them. And I get asked very often if it's frustrating or disheartening to see what's happening here. And it is absolutely frustrating. It is disappointing when you see members of Parliament willing to shut down, Liberal members of Parliament willing to shut down a key accountability mechanism that we have here, a tool to use on behalf of Canadians. That's disappointing. It is disheartening. But I have great heart and hope for our country, because in spite of the challenges that have been foisted upon them by Justin Trudeau's Liberal government, they continue to work hard. They will persevere. And they know that, because life wasn't like this before Justin Trudeau, and it's not going to be like this after he and his government are gone. It's deplorable, Mr. Chair, to have Liberal MPs come here and say that it's not important to get accountability for Canadians and it's too political. I'm sure it's too damaging politically for their government, but we're not going to abide that and let them say, well, they're awfully busy. We'll get busy with the right things, because they're able to have these meetings from they don't even need to leave their constituencies. They don't even need to leave their constituencies. It's 2 hours. Ask some officials some questions. Do the work. This is the work. This is part of the job. So, of course, I don't support the motion in its form. I have more questions for officials. So if this is going to get shut down, I will speak again, Chair, to at least advise the officials of what my questions are for them. Give them the opportunity to get back to us with some of those answers, because Canadians deserve the accountability. When I talk to them, when I hear from them, they're demanding accountability, and that's the function that we're providing for them. So. So I'm interested to hear what some of my colleagues have to say about this. But if this meeting is not going to go forward with questioning officials, I'll have more questions to pose to the officials, even if the Liberals are going to block the bureaucrats from answering them.
Thank you, Mr. Barrett.